Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Stories That Cannot Be Silenced, Overcoming Oppression and Censorship in Investigative Journalism. My name is JV Marasigan Pangan, and I will be your moderator tonight. The webinar is organized by Asian Network of Trust, or ANT-Hiroshima, an NGO based in Hiroshima, Japan, that pursues projects in international cooperation, international peace building, and peace education. First of all, I'd like to thank all the participants watching via Zoom. We are joined tonight by participants from all over the world. So thank you for joining us tonight. Just a few reminders, this webinar will run for less than an hour and a half, and speakers will present first, and then a panel discussion will follow at the end of all the presentations. All participants should be on mute mode while the session is ongoing. Please feel free to ask questions at any point of the webinar by using the Q&A feature. Please write your full name, country, and organization, and questions will be answered during the panel discussion. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, or you have a question that is not directed at the speakers, for example, a technical issue, please direct your messages to Daisy Whitby in the chat box. So my colleague Daisy Whitby will be in charge of that. With that, let's begin. In this webinar, we will explore how international collaboration can help journalists experiencing oppression and censorship by publishing stories through a network of journalists across the world. So some of our essential questions tonight are, how can coverage by international media play a crucial role in curbing governments' ability to control and censor information? So first, a presentation on the role of Global Investigative Journalism Network, or GIJN, by Yasuomi Sawa. Next, Alessia Cerantola will share with us her experiences covering Fukushima, the Panama Papers investigation in Japan, and the tobacco industry. And finally, Cédric Alviani from Reporters Without Borders will talk about the decline of press freedom. And now our next presentation is by Professor Sawa.
All right, thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for having me to this great event, online event tonight. My name is Yasuomi Sawa from J Forum and Senshu University. I've been a journalist for 30 years, and now I'm teaching journalism as well, and I'm organizing a journalism organization which helps journalists to connect each other in Japan and train each other to be stronger journalists. Please let me show my presentation here. So as Ms. Reyes Che told in her presentation, the last part, she referred to the international media society's help was great and significant. And I am talking in this presentation about how we can help each other to raise attention, raise awareness of the press freedom more, and of course, help our colleagues in a very tough situation. So, but first, please let me introduce myself. I've been working for 30 years. I had been working for 30 years for Kyodo News, and departed from the news agency that is Japan's largest news wire service last spring. And I turned to university teacher, professor. And I also working for the J Forum. This is the Journalism Practitioners Forum, and that is running many workshops and events to help each other and make connecting dots to train and teach each other, like an investigative journalism techniques and how to do a better FOIA request, FOIA Freedom of Information Act, and how to dig into the government secrets and something like that. But we launched this organization after being prompted by the activities held by GIJN, that's a Global Investigative Journalism Network, which has been helping investigative journalists worldwide. And it is really amazing for us because we haven't experienced such an activity here in Japan. But we have to begin with what is investigative journalism. Yeah, investigative journalism everywhere, but the definition varies. For example, UNESCO handbook says investigative journalism involves exposing to the public matters that are concealed by someone in a position of power. So the revealing, exposing the secret of government is very important, but it should be in public interest, which should be related to the well-being of people. And we have to learn the techniques, we have to get more skills to get into the secrets of government, because it is, of course, very tough job. But it is a little bit more simple, like critical and in-depth journalism. Wow, that's very important. We have to be critical, we have to be in-depth, get into the truth. So there are so many so-called journalism that it seems like very new and very intriguing. However, it is no depth. So there is a very thin line, but there is a very clear line between great journalism and very shallow journalism. And we are, of course, looking at deep, in-depth and serious journalism. However, as Che rightly mentioned, her very, very tough situation, there are so many places where journalists are facing strong oppression and intimidation, a challenging situation. For example, there are physical and cyber attack, including cyber trolls. Cyber trolls don't kill immediately journalists. However, it has a very strong chilling effect. If you are intimidated by, or you are just annoyed by trolls on the Facebook or Twitter or even Instagram, perhaps you think about, okay, next time I will be avoiding this kind of issues to be published. And that is the chilling effect. That kills journalism, even though that does not kill you immediately. That is the very strong effect of trolling. And that is happening. And of course, the government might charge you under the name of libel, or tax evasion, trespassing, treason, or something like, and you are trying to destroying the order or safety of this society. And there are, even though the government let you alone, there are so many cases of legal threat. Perhaps it is coming from like business world, and they always threat you with, okay, I will sue you, I will take an illegal action against this story if you once publish this one. And that chills you down as well. And recently, people are exploiting the concept of the right to be forgotten. I've got some report from Swedish colleagues that some lawyers are exploiting this concept to delete some people's names on the investigative stories. And of course, cyber harassment, that it trolls and death threats. And especially, they target particularly female journalists. But we have to fight. We can't be silenced by this kind of challenges. So how to combat this oppression? The first, we have to be stronger and we have to be cleverer. The way to tackle oppression, that is keeping on reporting, never stop reporting. That is the best way. That is what we can do even in such a situation. But of course, that is tough.
Professor
So,
Sawa,
yes,
we're just receiving some questions about the slides.
yes, please.
We are not being shown the slides yet.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh no, that's too bad. Okay, I will try. Okay, so sorry for that. Check.
that's fine. This happens. Like, yeah,
Oh no.
that's good. That's
Can you
right.
see this?
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right, thank you.
we can see it now. Okay.
All right. I'm so sorry for this inconvenience. So we're talking about training, the way to tackle oppression against reporting, keep on reporting, and how to train ourselves. They're like, we need more tools, more skilled, know-how, experience. That is how to dig deeper, how to do better reportings, and it is no secret for each other. We have to share our experiences, share our skills and knowledges that raise the level of practice of journalism overall. And we have to be protecting ourselves from a threat or oppression by knowing more, like better digital protection, how to be safe, how to keep secret, and especially it's very important for investigative journalism to keep your sources safe. So this is a conference held in Germany, in Hamburg, Germany, and 2 years ago. By the way, I met Alessia there. So this is a great conference with more than 400 people, with one common thing, that is investigative journalism. And it's like that, the great events, great workshops, and some entertainment and appeals and voices. And we can know each other and we can learn from each other. And we do that, GIJN do that online as well, of course, especially in the circumstances of COVID-19 crisis. It's very important. For example, this is the website of GIJN, and we have the resources here. Please just visit this. And there are so many great contents online. So for example, the reporting tips and tools, and you can do so many tips and tools. Just have a look, it is great. So how to investigate corporation, how to investigate elections, how to investigate corruption and poverty, property, and so many things. Also, we have safety and security issues here. We have to protect our secret sources from governmental investigations, and we have to keep ourselves safe from surveillance. There are so many tips here. Oh, this is the online harassment field manual. Yes, there are so many manuals here as well. And our organization, J-Forum, does the same here in Japan. These are workshops. Networks, we have to be connected. We have to build up our solidarity. And that's a very important occasion for us to connect each other and know each other, network each other on the conference and online as well. This is a model, it is a mock, but we exchange this kind of views and appeals and calls on the listserv. So how to know who is behind the anonymous account? And there is an answer. And of course, we do the same in the voicing the press freedom. Then we have to raise attention and make it hard. Like most recently, some colleagues in Russia was under attack. Then somebody might be sending this kind of message on the listserv. So this is the reaction. This is the real reaction. Perhaps you know the Roman Anin, with investigative journalism in Russia, his office was searched and he was interviewed by the security police. And we have to raise awareness. That is the best way to fight against oppression. And the GIJN made a statement here. And what to do when authorities radio form, it is another story from GIJN. And you can see it is a just conference, but the right side down, we have a great photograph here. And the lady from standing second from the right is a Filipino journalist, Maria Ressa. She's under threat and she was indicted, and he's in a crisis. So we can say journalism is not a crime in one voice. So serious journalism is under threat, but we can combat oppression with training and empowerment, and with international collaboration, networking, and we should make a solidarity and make noise as well, and awareness. And GIJN, which is in which our organization J Forum is a member of, is here to help international collaboration. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Professor Sawa. And of course, GIJN has been instrumental in creating a strong network of journalists worldwide. And GIJN's efforts to ensure free access to public documents and data, and their efforts to support investigative journalists through workshops and trainings and conferences and data sharing are all indelible contributions in the world of journalism. So thank you very much, Professor Sawa. And we are already receiving a lot of questions from being sent to Daisy, and some of the questions are, because I think some attendees are student journalists, and there are some questions for Professor Sawa, such as like, what's the general sentiment among students pursuing journalism, and what's the general sentiment by students who want to take up journalism or media? But I guess we'll answer those questions later during the panel discussion. So thank you very much, Professor Sawa. And our next speaker is Miss Alessia Cerantola, and she covered environmental issues, sex crimes, corruption, and cyber crimes. And she is from OCCRP. Thank you very much for joining us, Miss Alessia Cerantola. The floor is yours.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. And yes, and I think it's also a coincidence that it's a very nice coincidence, the fact that you're from Hiroshima, because Hiroshima is also the reason why I started being interested in Japan, and why I decided to become a journalist. So there's a red line connecting me to that city. And it's also how I started reporting about for the Italian media. So first covering Hiroshima, and then now at the moment I'm working as a reporter with OCCRP, which is a completely different way of doing journalism from where I started. And so I want to just go through a couple of moments of my my path in journalism, because it's also explaining how important it is to have a network, as Professor Sawa has just mentioned, and we also spoke about it right before this webinar. We are part of a big family. Being investigative journalist means also this, and this is what I want to highlight, and also what I want to stress out by showing how it was at the beginning and how it is now for me, and what is important, what has changed, and what is improved in many ways in doing journalism. So I started as a freelance journalist covering Hiroshima, then I've been covering for different years somehow, until recently also the earthquake and tsunami and Fukushima disaster since 2011. This was a very solitary way of doing journalism, because I was a freelancer. I was, trying to cover my own expenses, traveling to Japan, going there, and I was counting on myself basically. And covering a topic that was not easy, also for people living and journalists living in Japan. On my side, I had the fact that I was knowing the language of Japanese, it was somehow helpful, but not enough. Of course, especially if you go to Northeast Japan where they're speaking a dialect, it's just a small detail, but you need someone who is helping you in translating or understanding fully what you've been told by interviewees. And so it was since those small things that I learned how important it was to have into counting on other colleagues and on helping you. And also, of course, there was a political context that was quite hard to understand for a non-Japanese person. And so having counting and relating and, trying to have as sources and speak with other colleagues from Japan who were explaining to me the complicated, situation of the political context that was also key to understand what happened in Fukushima and also the consequences to it, because then many things happen also from a social political situation. And so that was the first moment. I mean, I was at that moment covering the Fukushima incident through using. I'm sorry, that's not the. I'm just showing you just some of the. I was covering it basically for BBC, where I was publishing stories about mother. For example, I went to. It's not changing the page. Yes, I went to some of the cities that have been affected by the nuclear and the radioactivity crisis, and I was interviewing people there. So this is just to give you an example of what kind of reporting I was doing. Very classical freelance reporting from the area. And it was when, as I told you, I understood the importance of networking, going together with other people, with other colleagues to cover these issues. For me, Japan, and especially Fukushima, and the previous reporting I'd done on that country works as a sort of Trojan horse for my following career, because I, with other colleagues in Italy, I co-founded a center for investigative journalism called IRP in Italian, Investigative Reporting Project Italy. So we started investigating organized crime, corruption, and other issues in our country, so in Italy. And we based we created this center based on the experience and on the examples of other centers that are that were already existing. First of all, ICIJ, and thanks to the help of the GIJN, by the way, that the Global Investigative Journalism Network was also during one of the conferences of the Global Investigative Journalism Network, we decided to create also this center to investigate Italian issues in Italy. So just to mention and highlight again and again the importance of belonging to this and to attending these conferences, of meeting other colleagues, being inspired by them, and trying to import the models to our own countries. For example, in Italy, of course, we had other media who were doing investigations, but traditional way, as I mentioned before. So in this way, by creating these centers that are that are funded by donors, or anyway, they're independent media, so they don't rely on political, funds from political parties or from advertisement, but they're completely independent. This allows us to have a lot of space for doing real independent journalism, or at least this is what we try to do, and to do at our best. And this is also one of the steps that then during this this path that I was mentioning, that preceded another investigation that I did, by the way, again, with Sawa-san, and it was the Panama Papers. There was one of the examples, the main examples of how a great network of journalists can work together for exposing, in this case, the corruption and tax evasion and cases that were related to this law firm based in Panama, Mossack Fonseca. The importance of having hundreds of journalists working together on the same topic, first of all, is increasing the impact of the stories, because if you go out with a single story on one specific individual country, of course, it can have an impact on that country. But while you go out all together on the same topic worldwide, of course, the impact is way bigger. And there's another element which is important for this kind of collaborative projects, that it's a little bit more difficult to target one single journalist. So if we work all together, it creates a sort of protection, a shield that is helping all the group, because you can't we say a bit forcing it, but you can't kill 400 journalists for having covered that one topic. So we are kind of protecting one each other and also enforcing our reporting. Of course, we know that something is not always perfect. There's something that can be improved. We know that unfortunately, one of the reporters who has been covering part of the Panama Papers. She's a Maltese journalist. She's been killed with a bomb in Malta. Unfortunately, after she was following some of the leads from the Panama Papers. So it's not a system that is perfect, but it's way better than what we were doing, the way we were doing the journalism before. And so this model, by the way, has been with the one of ICIJ, has been an inspiration for many other centers for journalism. And along with ICIJ, there's the center that I'm working for at the moment, which is OCCRP, Organized Crime Corruption Reporting Project. This is just to mention, by the way, the importance of a network. Right, a couple of days ago, one of our colleagues, Khadija Ismailova, has been released, managed to, who was arrested 5 years ago in Azerbaijan for covering politics in her home country. Now, after 5 years of fight, and thanks to the network of journalists who have been advocating, who have been very vocal in trying to, to first of all continue the project that she was doing while she was under arrest with the Khadija project. She's now able, for the first time after 5 years, to leave the country and go and visit her family. So this is also a success that is showing how important it is to work together with other colleagues. She was, by the way, the Khadija project was an inspiration for other kinds of these other projects that have been continued by journalists trying to follow up on the work of colleagues who have been arrested or couldn't speak. Also, if you think about forbidden stories, which is another important example in this case, or the other similar ideas and projects that are showing how journalists can can follow up on what a journalist, when a journalist is silent and is not allowed to continue its work in his own environment or country. Being part of this network can save your work, and you can continue speaking and you can continue working on your project, also thanks to the help of your colleagues. So you can't silence a journalist anymore the way you did before, because now you can have hundreds of journalists who can continue the work of one single reporter who you try to silence. Now with OCCRP at the moment, I'm working on this another collaborative project that has been for which we publish a series of stories, which is about tobacco, which is the one of the topic of this presentation. And so especially last year, right 1 year ago, we published Blowing and Smoke, which is an investigation, a collaborative investigation with a series of media partners about the tobacco world, specifically about a product which is the IQOS, a heated tobacco product from Philip Morris. So and we managed to work with a series of media partners from around the world, also from Japan and from other countries where usually it's harder to investigate the tobacco industry. But again, thanks to the network, thanks to the help that each media partner gave to the other media partners, we managed to put together an investigative project that had quite a huge impact in the anti-tobacco world. And it shows how important it is to share information, again, to share experiences, and to also to share our platforms, because thanks to our media, thanks to the media of other countries, you can expose also what is happening in your country and have a reaction from abroad that is again reinforcing the impact of the story and publication itself. So it's all a new way of doing journalism that is is taking from the tradition, traditional tools of investigative journalism, but at the same time is is trying to go over the borders of traditional journalism, and is trying to create new families and new networks, because as we used to say, it takes a network to fight a network. So this is what we are trying to do, to create new networks, to defeat organized crime, corruption that is sometimes well or better organized than journalists themselves. But we are doing our better to improve our networks and organizations and to fight these networks.
Thank you very much, Miss Alessia. Ciarantola, I got a very inspiring quote from you. You cannot silence a journalist anymore once they start networking. And that's also the message of ANT-Hiroshima, like ants, like we work together, we collaborate, and we're making it difficult for our oppressors to oppress us, because once, you have consolidated power, then you get stronger. And I believe that goes the same for journalists networking all over the world. Thank you very much, Ms. Alessia Cerantola, for that inspiring and eye-opening talk. And now we are on to our last speaker. Okay, now our last speaker is Cédric Alviani, and he is the East Asia Bureau Director of Reporters Without Borders. Cédric?
Yes, thank you, JV.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I represent Reporters Without Borders. I'm based in Taipei, and our bureau mostly covers the East Asia region. Reporters Without Borders is an international NGO that is defending freedom of the press, freedom of information. We have 5 types of missions. One, of course, is to gather information and to publish information on freedom of the press in the world. Another type of mission is to engage in advocacy actions, whether it is directly with governments, with the civil society of the countries and territories we cover, or within international organizations like the UN, UNESCO, Council of Europe, and other organizations in which we have an observatory status. We also have side activities, including capacity building. We're leading programs to support journalists in improving their ability to protect themselves, no matter it is online protection or physical protection. And last, we have an emergency assistance service that aims at supporting journalists when they are being threatened, support their families when they are being jailed. So these are the major missions of Reporters Without Borders. And we are, of course, trying to contribute to positive changes for journalism. Why supporting journalism? The world is full of terrible things. Of course, there's the current health crisis, the pandemic, war, terrorism, inequalities, destruction of our environment. So why focus on freedom of the press? Well, because without independent journalism, and especially without investigative journalism, none of these issues can be addressed. Without investigative journalism, it's impossible for the citizen to properly use their right of vote because they do not receive proper information that allows them to make educated choices. So in a nutshell, a world without journalism is not a world with citizens. It is a world with subjects, subjects of the state, subjects under the domination of the powerful. What is journalism? And that's very important what Professor Sawa mentioned earlier. Journalism, as we define it, is to impart facts for the public interest. So that the public could hold the powerful accountable. It's not because someone uses a microphone, a camera, or a printing press, so they are a journalist. And one of the major problems of journalism is that actually propaganda and entertainment are using the same tools as journalists. And in the spirit of the public, it's not very clear actually what is a journalist. And that leads to a lot of problems. That leads to, I would say, a global bad reputation of journalists because they are being confused with propagandists and with entertainers. So that's very important to define journalism as the fact to impart facts for the benefit of the public. This year's UN World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd had as a theme information as a public good. And we believe information cannot be considered as a regular merchandise because just like food, for example, like information is a necessity. And just like food, falsified information may have some very dramatic consequences. So it's very important to realize that investigative journalism is absolutely necessary to democracy and that quality, unbiased information is absolutely necessary for the citizens to be in control of their destiny. We have seen this at the time of the COVID-19 pandemics, where suddenly in many countries in the world, the people realized that the media they were somehow trusting were not trustable because actually they were not engaging in journalism, but they were carrying the government's propaganda. And then they realized that a virus cannot be censored. And it's not because government is censoring information on the virus that the spread of the virus is going to stop. Actually, it's the opposite, because if the people do not know how to protect themselves, it's going to make the situation worsen. Journalism, investigative journalism, is under attack all around the world. If you see behind me the map of the freedom of the press, and I'm sorry, I see that it's inverted. I do not know if it would be possible for someone in Zoom to put it back to the normal. No.
It looks fine for us. We can see the map properly. It's not inverted.
Okay.
It looks fine.
Okay, because I see it reverse. So if you don't see it reverse, if you can read Canada and not Adanak, it's perfect. Yes. So if you look at the freedom of the press map published by Reporters Without Borders every year, you will see that a very, very small number of countries practice journalism by the rules. Actually, the ones that are symbolized in white color, it's actually hard to find one. You will see a few countries in the north of Europe. You will see Costa Rica, you will see New Zealand, Portugal, but that's the number of countries that are countries that practice journalism by the rules is smaller and smaller. We count 12 countries, and it's only a very small fraction of the world's population. On the other hand, the countries symbolized in black or red, which have critical press freedom problems, are more and more numerous. One can estimate that 75% of the world lives under regimes that prevent the people from accessing independent information. Yeah. Over the past 10 years, 700 journalists were killed, and currently 100 of them are jailed, and thousands, probably actually 10,000, more than 10,000 are being very severely harassed. So, yeah, this is not the only problem to which journalism is confronted, but we now have authoritarian regimes very actively trying to change the definition of journalism. And this is even more pernicious than physical attacks on journalists. The number one enemy of press freedom in the world is now the Chinese regime, because they have the power to have an impact on press freedom in the world. The Chinese regime is trying to replace the very definition of journalism by state propaganda. So when this has happened, when the world considers that a journalist is not a person who should investigate, but a person who should report government's propaganda, then the Chinese regime won't even have to modify the narrative on China. Basically, every country will do its own self-censorship. So that's one very important fight for Reporters Without Borders, to ensure that journalism remains investigative journalism, and that government propaganda is never assimilated to journalism. So this is a very bad situation. Over the past decade, the global note we give to the world has decreased 12%, meaning that the world is 12% less free than it was 1 decade ago. However, there are still some topics of hope. The first thing is that somehow, because the social media have replaced the traditional function of mass media, so actually journalists now can focus more on investigation. It's not necessary anymore to have media that impart a lot of entertainment content, for example, because entertainment is everywhere. So journalists can really focus on investigation. It's also possible through crowdfunding to have a direct financial support from readers. And this allows some media to focus on a certain category of public, a certain category of investigation. And we believe, of course, that this can be helpful. And for the public, it now becomes possible to support one investigative media. And I personally encourage very much citizens not only to go and vote, especially in countries where voting does not necessarily, represent the public's majority opinion, but also to support financially an independent media. It's not a lot of money, but it can make the difference. It allows to keep investigation and to keep holding the powerful accountable. And of course, I totally agree with what was said before regarding international collaboration of journalists. A journalist might be threatened when they are the only one to release a story, but of course, if the story becomes widely released, it's impossible, even for the worst government on earth, to attack them the same way. So cooperation is really important. And also nowadays, perpetrations do not only come from one country, one government, but there are some global companies that need to be investigated worldwide. And it's very important to have this cooperation of journalists. So that's why thank you very much for organizing this event today, because it's talking about something that is capital for the future of democracy and for the future of journalism.
Thank you very much, Cedric. And it is an honor to have all four speakers speak with us today and the participants. And this is rare because we have good representation of journalists from all over the world and with a mix of experiences. So thank you very much for joining us, Professor Sawa, Miss Alessia, Miss Che, and Cedric. So now we're going to move to our panel discussion. Now that we heard from all our four speakers, if I've got any questions, now is a great time to send them over using the Q&A feature, or if you want to ask questions anonymously, you can send a message to Daisy Whitby on Zoom. But we have a question now, and this question is addressed to Ms. Che de los Reyes. The question is, I just got an excerpt from the question. So many academic institutions are still discouraging their writers. This is from John Sebastian Gianan. Many academic institutions are still discouraging their writers to be critical due to fear of political attacks. This violates the rights of our student journalists enshrined in the Republic Act 7079 or the Campus Journalism Act of 1991, a law being called for revision for its vague provisions in protecting campus press freedom. As such, we remain victims of despotic administrative intervention, editorial censorship, legal defunding, and even harassment. Given this climate where oppression's chilling effects severely plague our schools and students, why is it important for campus journalists to be investigative, speak up, and act on the wrongs of our state? It's a heavy question, but go on, Ms. Ray.
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is a very relevant question because as many of our local papers, community papers have closed down because of lack of funding, especially during the pandemic. There are a lot of community papers in the Philippines that closed down. The campus papers, the university papers have become a sort of sort of a surrogate community paper for many of our communities. So these traditionally student papers covering campus issues have now are now covering issues in the larger communities, and as such, many of them have been covering local corruption and local issues outside of the campus, and as such, they are also being targeted right now um, by an oppressive government. I think especially state universities, state-run universities, are being pressured by the government to clamp down on these student publications. Uh, I think the fact that you know that it's not right, and the fact that you know the law that governs it, is one big step towards fighting this oppression. And I think I'm sure you're a member of the College Editors Guild of the Philippines. There is one such organization where they provide, and this College Editors Guild of the Philippines, it's an organization of different campus papers. They are also they have also close ties with national organizations of journalists, like the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, and they can provide support in terms of legal support or even trainings. I think this is a perfect example of how networking with other organizations is crucial, not only in fighting oppression, but also in equipping ourselves and our members, leveling up our skills to confront the challenges, the bigger challenges and bigger responsibilities that are now that are now on our shoulders because of the loss of community papers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Che, for mentioning that. Actually, when I was chair of CEGP Central Luzon in 2013, one of the most common problems that we experience is that we are being red tagged, or we are being accused as communists, which is a very dangerous accusation because students get persecuted. Some of them get threatened. Some of them get sued for libel by their own universities. What is your advice to these students suffering who don't have lawyers and who don't have the resources to probably fight back against the state itself?
My advice is always to network, to connect with larger organizations, because they will provide support. They have pro bono lawyers who are really they have programs designed to address such issues. They
Thank you.
can connect you with other groups of lawyers like the National Union of People's Lawyers, and there are many organizations that can help.
Thank you very much, Ms. Che. And I think I'm interested to know like what Professor Sawa thinks about this, because you are a journalism professor at Senshu University. What's the general sentiment of student journalists or students pursuing journalism as a career in Japan, or at least in Senshu University?
Because of the quite recent phenomenon, recent circumstances of the general journalism in Japan as well, they are somehow feeling daunted by the very like abusing comments on the social media against the journalists. And their what's a concept of journalists is, oh, they're people who are attacked online by some very nasty general public in anonymity. However, they understand very well in my classes that how important investigative journalism, how important serious biting journalism is. So they are very good, and how important it is to have a working journalist in the working democracy. They are two tightly connected things. But another thing is, I have to share what the student journalism in Japan is like, because there is nothing like that, almost, because there is a two different concepts from Western or Filipino understanding of campus journalism, because learning journalism in Japanese university is not writing or not video footing or not broadcasting by themselves. They are just learning on the desk, learning in the classroom about media ethics, media history, and media, let's say, and even media victims, so-called. And they are too much focusing on, some professors, I have to say, are too much focusing on the harms caused by media, like obnoxious coverages or annoying interviewing or something like that. And the general reaction from the general public is very, very adverse against journalism. That is what I'm tackling right now by encouraging them by writing their own stories of campus media, which I am launching now.
Well, it's comforting to hear that things are changing, at least in your area or in your university. So thank you very much, Professor Sawa, for saying that. Okay, we will now move on to our next question from Annelise Geisbert. The question is investigative journalism under threat in Japan? Well, let's focus on that first question, Professor Sawa.
All right. Yes, but in the quite different terms, like in the Philippines. I'm feeling very, very sorry to hear that our Filipino colleagues are under serious attack by the very direct, very, let's say, blunt attack by the government. In our situation, however, Japanese investigative journalism are still under. I don't say which is which, but the serious attack mainly by the legal threat. The libel law in Japan got much more serious, perhaps 20 years ago. they beefed up their fines against in the civil lawsuits of libel cases, and that with the serious and actual attack on mainly the investigative journalism magazines. And obviously, the numbers of the stories published on the magazines declined after that. And now we are under attack, especially it's a very Japanese sentiment, but the removal of identification or names, real names from stories, because it's always, they say, you can do your stories without names. I don't think so, but it's a very strong pressure. I have written some pieces on the Anonymous Society of Japan, but you can Google it. So when we did the Panama Papers project in Japan, we have a very serious, let's say, pressure from the business side or lawyers to remove who's who on the stories. It is really, really daunting, the serious attack on Japan, and it is ongoing and worsening, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much, Professor Sawa. I think media problems in different parts of the world come in different forms. Like in the Philippines, it comes like in many, many forms, like killings and censorship, oppression. I'm looking at the data at Committee to Protect Journalists right now. And according to their data, there's only one journalist who was killed, and it was in 2003. And it's the only journalist killing since 1992. And it's kind of like not government related. But again, we can go back to that. And the next question is still by Annelies Geispert. And the question is, are there common challenges between, for example, journalists in France and in Italy, or journalists in Taiwan and France, or Italy and Japan? So who would like to go on and answer that question? Okay, Cédric.
Yeah, maybe a quick comment on what was said before. Press freedom, the problem of press freedom does not only come from authoritarian countries. Most of the times, there are attacks on press freedom in authoritarian countries because the countries that should be an exemplar are not an exemplar. I won't talk about France. Reporters Without Borders is based in France, and I'm French. And I might be very harsh if I talk about the situation of press freedom in France, but it's not the only problem. We've been very vocal, of course, on the attitude of President Donald Trump during all his mandate, and the way it somehow fueled some physical aggressivity on journalists. So this is something very important. We are very critical on the Japanese government. Although, of course, Japan is a democracy and it's possible in many cases to freely publish information, but we believe Japan does not keep up its rank as one of the leading democracies in the world. It should be doing much better than what it currently does. Can you imagine that in the period of COVID-19 pandemic, the Japanese government has reduced by half the number of journalists invited to its press conferences. And the excuse is that the room is too small. Just like it's impossible for the Japanese government to find a bigger room to accommodate more journalists. Can you imagine that? So it's really important that we would keep in mind that democracies have to be an exemplar, and they currently are not an exemplar, and the major problem comes from here. So yes, there is a relationship and there needs cooperation between journalists from all countries because they all have the same problem. And when we're talking about Panama Papers, when we're talking about WikiLeaks, when we're talking about holding the powerful accountable, it is necessary in every country. And there are not some countries that would need journalism because they have an authoritarian government, and the other ones that wouldn't need investigative journalism because they are supposedly democracies and there is no problem. Corruption is everywhere. It's a plague everywhere in the world, and it's necessary everywhere in the world to have investigative journalists and in every country.
Thank you very much, Cédric, for bringing that up. Alessia?
Yeah, I think the situation in Italy, well, by the way, now is doing slightly better with the Reporters Without Borders the map, but it's not brilliant in terms of in the European context. Italy is not doing that well, and especially because of the situation of journalists themselves and laws protecting or not protecting basically journalists. The situation is particularly bad because most of the journalists, there's a huge number of journalists who are freelancers and who are underpaid, been reporting about that. This is a huge problem. It's not just about, we are speaking, I remember some recent percentage of 60% of Italian journalists are freelancers, which is and they are underpaid, and this is a huge this is a very important tool or weapon in the hands of whoever wants to sue them, because of course then you need legal protection. So libel laws are very against and very it's a weapon in the hands of whoever wants to try to silence them, and this is also working very well. And that's why many journalists either self-censor themselves, because they, just as happening in Japan or in many other places, they just avoid the problem. Others, they just keep doing what they do, and they do it also in areas like southern Italy that are in the hands of mafias. And so they're publishing articles for €5, $6, $7, covering issues like Ndrangheta, Cosa Nostra, the big Italian mafias. And there's not a lot of protection at the national level. See, this is why, again, I stress the importance of, and this is also an advice I would give also to younger journalists or people who are trying to enter the profession, or trying to create and join international networks. They're free. You can, for example, attend conferences, webinars like this, and connect to people, find other people who are doing the same thing you're doing. Or you can also use the platforms, the tools from GIJN, but many others that you can find online, and try to connect with journalists from other countries, maybe covering the same issues. For example, in the case of Italy, we used to say that mafia is international. Is more international journalists. I mean, they're in a way they're more advanced than us, and so why not trying to do the same? And so, in terms of journalists connecting to other people from other countries, putting together the efforts, and so. Also enforcing our own reporting. This is one way I would suggest for journalists, for not only having more protection, but also having more impact. But at the same time, for example, this is giving you the chance, just an example, of publishing in more countries and more languages. Because if you join, for example, you work together with a colleague from Germany, for example, from Italy to Germany, or it can be from Japan with a colleague from South Korea, for example, you can publish in both countries. And if you join also a colleague from the US, covering again the same topic, you can have 3 countries, 3 languages, and your stories